Hi everyone, this is Veronica. Today we are going to discuss about coming recession because somewhere it is suspected that recession may hit the global economy. So what options do we have? We'll discuss in detail. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook for my video updates because I feel together we can make a huge difference. Now, what is the relevance of this topic in your exam? Then in your mains paper 3 in Indian economy, it will be covered at objective level. You should know what is recession, what is slowdown of the economy, what is the difference between the two. And at subjective level, you should know the present global economic slowdown and what options actually we have ahead. Now, in what context today we are studying this? Because there are growing fear of global recession at the moment, and there are three negative supply shocks that could trigger it by 2020. So there could be three negative supply shocks. So we'll discuss what are supply shocks. So to understand the supply shock, it is basically an unexpected event that changes the supply of a product or commodity, resulting in a sudden change in price. So we can see a sudden change in the price. Now supply shocks can be negative, that is decreased supply, or positive, which means positive. In case of positive, there is increased supply. However, they are more often triggered by negative. So supply shocks usually are negative in nature. That means there is a decreased supply, and these negative supply shocks have many potential causes also. If we talk about what are the causes for negative supply shocks, then an increase in input cost. So you all know what is input cost, which we initially input, and then expenses can cause the aggregate supply curve to shift to the left, which tends to raise the prices, and ultimately we have increased input cost and reduce output cost. So this is what negative supply shock, the potential reasons for negative supply shock is. So natural disasters such as a hurricane or earthquake, it can temporarily create negative supply shocks. Now, what are the potential reasons for the global recessions that we are already suspecting? Now, first is trade war. So Sino-American, we use a word for the China. So we already know there is rhetorics going on between China and America for a long time on economy related aspects. So this China-American trade and currency war, it has escalated when the US administrations threatened additional tariffs. So what US government did, they put additional tariffs on some of the Chinese goods, Chinese exports, and labeled China a currency manipulator. So this has led towards a trade war between America and China. Then we can see a technology war also. So China and America are vying for dominance over the industries of the future. So what are the industries of the future? Like artificial intelligence, 5G, robotics, etc. There are many others, but these are the famous ones. So both are vying for dominance over these industries. And third potential reason could be oil supplies. So if America's confrontation with Iran, which is already going on, it escalates into a military conflict, then global oil prices could spike. So okay, if these global oil prices could spike, and it can bring on a recession, because this kind of things already happened during previous West Asia's wars in 1973, in 1979, and in 1990 also. So now, if we talk about what will be the impact of such a recession, then all of these potential shocks would have a stagflationary effect. That means in the times of recession, we will see inflation also. That is what is the meaning of stagflation. And there could be an increase in price of imported consumer goods, intermediate inputs, technological components, and energy due to reduced output by disrupted global supply chains. And ultimately, this conflict between US and China is already fueling a broader process of deglobalization. So we are seeing a phenomena called deglobalization, as countries and firms cannot count on the long-term stability of the integrated value chains. Now, trade in goods, services, capital, labor, information, technology, it's getting increasingly balkanized, it's getting disrupted, and global production cost will rise across all the industries slowly. So this kind of impact we will see on our market, on our global economy. Now, next question which arises is, are we prepared to tackle this? See, following the stagflationary shocks, if we compare it from 1970s, the monetary policy makers responded at that time by tightening the monetary policy. So now here we are talking about a term called tight monetary policy. So what is tightening the monetary policy means? So tight monetary policy is basically a course of action which is undertaken by a central bank, such as your RBI in India or Federal Reserve in other countries, basically to slow down overheated economic growth. So this will constrict spending in an economy that is seen to be accelerating too quickly, or basically to curb inflation. If we want to curb inflation, we will take such steps when it is rising too fast. So today major central banks, they are ready pursuing monetary policy easing also. So opposite to tight monetary policy is your monetary policy easing, and sometimes it is also known as quantitative easing also. It is an unconventional monetary policy. If we talk about what is easing, in which central bank purchases government securities or other securities from the market in order to increase the money supply and encourage lending and investment. So when short-term interests are at or approaching zero, normal open market operations which target interest rates are no longer effective. So instead, a central bank can target specified amounts of assets to purchase. So this easing increases the money supply by purchasing assets with newly created banks reserves in order to provide banks with more liquidity. So if there is easing of monetary policy, so we are kind of increasing the liquidity. So any inflationary pressure from an oil shock, it will be seen as merely a price level effect. So it won't affect the economy for long. Rather than as a persistent increase in inflation, it will just be a price level effect. But negative supply shocks, they will reduce both growth and inflation by depressing consumption and capital expenditures. So there are firms in US, Europe, China and other parts of Asia which have already cut down on capital expenditures, and global tech, manufacturing and industrial sectors are also in recession in these nations right now. So as private consumption is still strong, this hasn't resulted in global slump yet, because your private consumption is still very strong. So if the prices of imported goods rise further, real disposable household income growth would reduce, right? So if household income growth would reduce, the global economy may enter into the recession. So in such times, how our policy making should take place? So central banks should ease policy rates. This is one of the option we have. Like fiscal policy makers should also prepare a similar short-term response. There is a need for counter-cycle fiscal easing to prevent recession from becoming too severe. And if we talk in medium term, adjusting to negative supply shocks without further easing could be the solution, because negative supply shocks from a trade and technology war would be more or less permanent. Because we are, the potential reasons I gave you in earlier slide for the coming recession is about the trade war, is about the technology war. So definitely we cannot bring short-term or permanent solutions for this. We need to adjust with these things, because these kind of wars would be more or less permanent. So now you must understand that there is a difference between the 2008 global financial crisis and right now the negative supply shocks that could hit the global economy today. So today it is more about the negative supply shocks. Because the former, about the 2008 financial crisis, it was mostly a large negative aggregate demand shock that depressed growth and inflation. So it could be met with fiscal and monetary policies. But this time what we are seeing today, the world would be confronting sustained negative supply shocks that would require a very different kind of policy response over the medium term. So again I am telling you, by supply shock This is an event that suddenly increases or decreases the supply of a commodity or a service, or commodities and services in general. And in economics, recession is a business cycle, that means contraction when there is general decline in the economic activity. So in India, even this slowdown is confirmed. So the first macro data set which was released under the new finance minister, it showed that underperforming economy, because we have seen GDP growth falling to 5.8% in the fourth quarter of 2018-19. So in India, at least this slowdown is confirmed. So talking about the way forward for this slowdown in our country right now, our ministers has to boost consumption, which means putting more money in the hands of people. We need to cut taxes, which is not easy given the commitment to rein in the fiscal deficit. So like this, we have problem in our country right now. And talking about what is this global recession right now, because in an economy, a recession happens when output declines for more than 2 successive quarters, that is 6 months. However, global recession institutions such as IMF, they look at this more than this, because they look at the widespread impact of terms of employment and demand of oil, etc. also. But as I told you, there is a difference between economic recession. It is different from an economic slowdown. So in India right now, we have economic slowdown. See, by recession, we mean the GDP. So what is GDP? It is the total value of all the goods and services produced or created in a country in a year. So when this value falls, the country's economy is said to be in recession. So it means that the country is producing and earning less than what it did, say, 6 months ago. So an economic recession is marked by low consumer spending, because people lose confidence in the growth of the economy. This decrease in the demand of goods and services in turn leads to a decrease in production as companies reduce the output to match the demand. This also leads to layoffs and rise in unemployment, as is being witnessed in US today. However, one-off decline in the GDP does not mean that the economy has slipped into recession, because the GDP must decline for 2 consecutive quarters for it to be called recession, and currently several countries are facing one. And next is your slowdown. So what do we mean by slowdown? On the other hand, it means that pace of GDP growth has decreased. Countries like India and China are currently faced with an economic slowdown. It means the production and earnings of these economies are not growing at the same pace, say, last year. So an economic downturn is normal after 6-7 years of fast-paced growth. So the Chinese economy, which has grown at a scorching pace in the past few years, is expected to slow down. In a normal language, you can understand between a salary cut and a smaller increment. While one reduces an individual's actual income, the other merely a drop in the growth of that income. So a slowdown usually precedes recession but does not necessarily lead to one. So you should understand the difference between the two. So this is all about the global recession that we are expecting in 2020 if we do not take, if the world economy do not take proper measures, countries do not take proper measures, policies to counter this. So if you have any confusion, you can contact me. Thank you. So this is the channel Study IQ. If you're preparing for UPSC or any government exam, our pen drive and tablet courses are available. If you're preparing for UPSC CSE 2020, our pen drive course is available, where you can find 100% coverage of UPSC vast syllabus. Daily current affair updates will be available. Self-paced learning process is provided. This course has been prepared by top faculties of Study IQ, and now you can purchase this course at Rs 625 per month only. For additional information, you can visit our site, and there are the phone numbers also given. You can call them and gain the additional information. You can connect with me for my video updates on Instagram and Facebook, because I feel together we can make a huge difference. For queries, you can even email me. Thank you so much.